right, why don't we get started with the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the South Burlington School Board meeting. And I'll start with any comments from the public regarding items that are not on the agenda. All right, seeing none. David, any amendments to the agenda?
Just that we need to add to the end of our agenda discussion regarding labor negotiation, teacher and support staff to the end of our agenda under executive session.
Okay. All right, seeing nothing else, we'll move on to agenda item 5, student representative report and announcements.
Michelle Souls, the physical ed teacher at Chamberlain School, is the 2015 VT Elementary School Physical Education Teacher of the Year. And she will be honored at a breakfast at the annual conference for the VT Association for Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance on November 12th through 13th in Killington, Vermont.
Great.
I had one announcement as well. On November 5th, 7 o'clock till 9 o'clock, at the City Hall conference room, there's going to be a community meeting regarding education funding and financing. The chair of the Education Committee for the House is going to be presenting, as well as, I believe, Jeff Francis, the head of the Superintendent's Association, will be presenting, explaining how it works, explaining what some of the options are, because this is something that will probably be addressed in the next legislative session. So I suggest whoever can make it to that should.
What was the time? Do you know the time?
7 o'clock till 9 o'clock.
And I'm sorry, where is it again, Martin?
The city hall, the city
Okay.
offices, the conference room there.
Thanks, Mark.
Great. Any other announcements?
A lot going on, a lot of soccer activity going on. I heard success in both boys and girls. Is that right, Mr. Burke?
Yeah.
Today? So both advancing, we're into the playoff schedule. A lot of other great activities going on too, inside and outside the building.
Excellent. Good. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 6, the rebel name, and this is warned for action. I don't know if you want to make any opening comments, David. I have a couple comments to make. Okay. I just wanted to preface, I assume many of you in the audience tonight are here to hear about this topic, and I wanted to preface the discussion tonight by saying I think it might have been easy to dismiss the concerns that were raised by some of the public in discussion of the rebel nickname and that ongoing use of the name, despite the fact that 20 years ago a decision had been made to eliminate any imagery used at the high school associated with the Confederate South. The board wants to extend its appreciation to all those who've weighed in and provided feedback through emails. I think we've received over 150 emails. We've received phone calls individually and as a group. We've had 3 previous agenda items where we've had public discussion on the topic. And I know, like my colleagues, have had many informal conversations in grocery stores, at spin class, and the dentist's office, and other venues that we each find ourselves. I think some people have described the dialogue as a no-win situation for those who have passionate views on either side of the topic, whether we retain or eliminate the nickname. But I believe the fact that the community is engaged in this conversation and this dialogue is a win already. It's not convenient. It's sometimes uncomfortable. I think it challenges conventional thinking, and I think it forces us to take stock of where we are at as a community. So I know, speaking on behalf of the board, I want to compliment my colleagues on the time that all of us have put into the discussion and listening to feedback, and ensure the community that feedback was taken very seriously. So we're going to start the conversation tonight hearing comments from our high school principal, Pat Burke. He was not able to be at our meeting last week. I hope your daughter's fine. And then the board's going to begin its discussion, its deliberation, and render an opinion. At that point, I'm going to open up the floor to the public for comments for a brief period before we assume work on the balance of our agenda, if everyone on the board is agreeable with that approach.
Yeah.
All right, Great. So, Mr. Burke,
Thanks. Can I sit over here? Is that all right?
you can sit wherever you'd like.
Great. So, I apologize for not being here the last time. There are times when I think my family's like a MASH unit, keeping the local healthcare institutions in good stead. But I just have a few words to say, and then look forward to your discussion, I suppose. The side of the wall at the high school says the words "building a proud tradition," and I think that it's most notable that the word building is included in that. It doesn't say South Burlington High School, a proud tradition. It says building a proud tradition. And I think the people who chose that motto were very intentional in selecting the word building. And I think that what that really says to us as a school and as a community is that we're always getting better. And at no time do we kind of sit back, despite the illustrious history of our school and community. At no point do we sit back and kind of say, finally, we're done, a proud tradition, you know. And so I want you to know that that ethic is at the heart of not only the administration and the community, but also the teaching faculty and the students. And as such, we strive on a daily basis to become a welcoming and inclusive community, and I think our efforts in this area are readily visible in the classrooms, in the hallways, at co-curricular events, and often in the community, and certainly at athletic events. Still, I acknowledge that at South Burlington High School, we are not perfect in this area, and we are not free of challenges relating to issues such as inclusion, race, and intolerance that face much of our country. And unlike many of you, though, I get to see amazingly thoughtful and tolerant young people work together and respect each other in ways that most adults do not. It gives me both hope for the future and confidence in the next generation. As an educator, I tend to look at everything that happens with a slightly twisted vantage point. When good things happen, I always ask, what can we learn from that? When tragedy strikes, still it's, what can we learn? How can we get better? Give an educator a controversy and he or she will seize it as an opportunity to learn. It's what we do. And after tonight, there will be some who are happy and some who will be displeased, but for all of us, there will be an opportunity to learn and get better. My role with colleagues will be to make sure that this discussion and actions taken as a result make us better as a school, and to the extent it can, make us better as a community. And I'm 100% ready and willing to take that on. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will open it up to my colleagues for any comments.
I'll start. So let me also thank everybody who's voiced their thoughts on this matter. The comments have offered insights, they've been enlightening, and they've certainly been thought-provoking. So we appreciate your openness and sharing your viewpoints. Myself, my association with the South Burlington District dates back to the late 70s and early 80s when my children attended Orchard Middle, now Tuttle School, and SBHS. Throughout, I've associated South Burlington rebels with critical thinkers who don't mindlessly follow the mainstream crowd. This thinking has been reinforced by the actions of now several decades of positive examples set by district students and employees. The district has been consistent in its actions to include everyone in what is becoming an ever more diverse community. That should remain the district policy and practice. So accordingly, I am for preserving the use of rebels. But having said that, I do find it appropriate that the district recognize the concerns brought to it in recent discussion by directing the administration to establish an ongoing guiding committee of stakeholders. That would include students, parents, community members, faculty, administration, and perhaps outside advisors. To seek ways and methods to foster informing students and employees that what being a South Burlington rebel means and how rebels act. It should not deny the past, good or ill, but rather use history as a platform from which to develop its counsel. This body should draw from the many excellent ideas offered to the board in the course of this discourse as a basis for its actions. It should regularly report to its efforts and the results to the district school board.
Thanks, Dan.
It's up to you.
Okay,
Julie?
so I want to echo what Elizabeth and Dan have said about being appreciative for everything that all of you come to say to us, because we've heard from a lot of you, and everything that you say is important, and everything that you've said has helped to inform my view on this tonight. As you know, I'm a graduate of South Burlington High School, and so in my own mind at least, I'm a rebel. To me, that means that I am part of the South Burlington school community and that I've been fortunate enough to share history with others who have lived here and were educated here. The rebel name for me was never a source of prejudice, but rather a symbol of pride in my school community and in my classmates. There are so many times in a student's school career when they may feel isolated or alone. One thing I think works to unite students, present and past. They are all rebels. As an adult, I've seen the rebel name continue to bring alumni, staff, and students together. I think about Mr. Burke tweeting about the accomplishments of many former students with the hashtag #OnceARebel. I love reading those tweets about our kids, and that's what it feels like to me, hearing about our kids. As my own children have made their way through this system, I've been proud of the diverse population that we have here and the many learning experiences that my children and I have had as a result. Our family has been enriched by friendships with people of different heritage, cultures, and religious beliefs. As I've struggled with this issue at hand, I've tried to determine what my role as a school board member really is. This made me think about our school mission. The mission of the South Burlington School District, a community committed to excellence in education, is to ensure that each student possesses the knowledge, skills, and character to create a successful and responsible life. We will do this by building safe, caring, and challenging learning environments, fostering family and community partnerships, utilizing global resources, and inspiring lifelong learning. I believe we are fulfilling this mission. We are teaching our young adults to be sensitive to the needs of others, to be respectful of each other's unique differences, and to stand up for themselves and their peers. We have taught them to rebel against injustice and prejudice. This issue has become a learning opportunity in the following sense. To avoid misunderstanding and false accusations, labels must be embraced within the context of their usage. There are, and there will continue to be, many examples of labels that carry different meanings in different circumstances. Words or labels alone do not define the South Burlington School District. Rather, it's the day-to-day actions of our students that will define who they are and what they will become. As an elected board member, I've listened carefully to the community, and I feel very bad if there is anyone who feels offended by our name and their interpretation of what our name means. I believe that the South Burlington Rebel is a student who is passionate and not afraid to stand up for what they believe. It is in part our job to encourage what they believe, to be open, constructive, positive, sensitive, and informed. The majority of constituents that I represent feel strongly that we keep the Rebel name. For these reasons, I believe we should maintain the name and work to clearly define our version of the name for our school district.
Thanks.
I will echo the other opening comments. I very much appreciate the discussion and the debate that we've had over the last few months. I'm very proud to be part of a community that not only listens to the voice of its citizens and its students, but actually seeks it out. As I considered all the opinions, the points of view, and the collection of information informing my own opinion, I'm left with a number of what I see are important factors. First, over the years and today, the South Burlington School District has worked diligently and with thoughtful purpose to define Rebel in a positive light. I am struck by how we use the Rebel moniker to build both individual strength in our students and group strength in both our sports teams and our non-athletic groups. In addition, in my travels throughout the state, I know South Burlington's schools are well known in the state for their openness and acceptance of diversity in many, many forms. At the same time, we cannot ignore the fact that in the past, the Confederate flag and other symbols of a time marked by racism were present in our district. With those two competing forces, I'm left with the question, which is more powerful in our community? The chance that the word rebel will be used to spread hate or racism, or the power of our students, teachers, and administration to use the moniker to educate all of us in a way that our actions, not just our words, dictate how we are viewed. I believe that we should keep the rebel nickname, re-energizing our education on how the word in another context was used, and take ownership through our behavior and openness of how we want the larger community to view us.
Thanks, Patrick.
I guess I'll do it as
Martin?
well. This is a difficult decision for me. We've heard from reasonable people on both sides of this issue. And I believe that people can legitimately be offended by the district's use of the Rebels name, but also that people can legitimately celebrate the name. And if you associate the name with the Confederacy, with slavery, with the Jim Crow era, and injustice to minorities, then you certainly have a good reason to be offended. But if you associate the name with the many positive aspects of the term, the questioning of authority, the nonconformity, standing up for your own opinion, then you have a right to embrace the name. Given some of the history surrounding the Rebels name at the school, particularly the use of Confederate symbols in the 60s and 70s, I do understand how people attach negative connotations to the term. It was obviously foolish and insensitive for anyone connected with the school to use Confederate symbols. But the use of Confederate symbols in association with the rebel name was not officially sanctioned by the district, and the district officially prohibited their use some years ago. South Burlington schools are inclusive institutions. After hearing from the students and the community, we've seen no indication that the use of the term has made the school environment less welcoming. Still, the question for me is whether we are able to separate the Rebels name from the negative connotations now that we've had this opportunity for community discussion. I'm not sure that we can, but I'm willing to allow the administration the opportunity to try to do so by implementing the recommendations that they have put forth at our last meeting. I think the administration should also solicit and consider ideas from others on how to emphasize the positive associations of the term rebels and teach students the historical context. We need to make clear what the term stands for in 2015 in South Burlington. It must be crystal clear that we are using the term to mean that we are developing free thinkers in our schools, problem solvers, people who will challenge the conventional opinion and will seek unique solutions, people who will not simply conform and accept established thinking. So I would not change the name at this time. Instead, I would direct the administration to consider the recommendations, including looking at a working group, as Dan had suggested, that they have made, and to implement those that are necessary to make it clear what we mean by rebels. If we are unable to do that, then we should revisit this issue and decide whether a name change is the only course to follow. I'm very sympathetic to those who want to change the name. I lived in Richmond, Virginia for a year, and I lived on Monument Avenue, down the street from monuments to Jeb Stuart, Robert E. Lee, and other Confederates. These monuments are indicative, I believe, of the South's efforts, the previous Confederate states, to own or control the country's collective memory of the Civil War. I actually think those monuments were a collection of the biggest second-place trophies I've ever seen. But in any event, I don't think the states that made up the Confederacy should own or control the memory of the Civil War. And likewise, I don't want the racists or the bigots to own the term rebels, a term that can have many positive meanings as it has in South Burlington. So I'm willing to give the district a chance to make our meaning clear.
Thanks, Martin. I want to spend a couple minutes talking about what has informed my decision as a board member. First off, I'm not a graduate of the South Burlington School District. I am a Vermont native and resident, and I've been a South Burlington resident and community member for the past 12 years. I had a chance several years ago to participate in a UVM course alongside of many South Burlington educators, and the title of that course was The Challenges of Multiculturalism for Educational and Social Institutions. This was an opportunity that was recommended to me by the guidance counselor at the high school. And this is an example, I think, of the kinds of ongoing professional development that many of the staff go through. It was a really informational and kind of intense course, but one that really challenged the notion of white privilege. It challenged a lot of the institutional racism that exists within educational institutions. So as a board member, it was really helpful to me as I was starting my service on the board. I currently participate in the district's Cultural Competency Steering Committee, and many of you probably don't know that that exists. The district participated in the Community and Economic Development Office's CEDO's We Belong program in 2014, and I participated in that alongside with many administrators and educators as well. That is a program that supports the continuation of our efforts around the issues of inclusion, diversity, and cultural competency. That steering committee exists today. It's fairly the work was kind of slowed down over the summertime and was reinvigorated under Mr. Young's leadership in terms of placing an individual who has some job responsibility over that steering committee. And we actually met yesterday to kind of reinvigorate some of the work we had been doing and some of the strategic direction we had started to establish for the district. I've done a lot of reading, a lot of articles and several books, including Mr. Walsh's book, Through White Eyes. Again, I referenced in my opening comments the over 150 emails, the phone calls, informal conversations, both inside and outside the South Burlington community, and that was something I tried to seek out, as well as the 3 public sessions that we've had. I considered the administrator's letter to the board that was discussed at our last meeting. I also looked at our policy. And then I looked to my own family. Many of you may not be aware of this, but I have 2 young adult children, both of whom are African American. So my opinion, there's been a lot of conversation whether or not the Rebel name should be rebranded. And I believe the decision was made over 20 years ago to eliminate the offensive connection with the Confederate South. I think rebranding wasn't a word back then, but I'd argue that the behaviors, even before then and perhaps all along, have served to create positive equity for the South Burlington Rebel nickname. I don't believe the decision to be one of the need to eliminate vestiges of a past association, but one of material impact to the learning environment at South Burlington schools. I do believe we need to formalize the equity that has already been established in the nickname. I also believe that the nickname does not harm the district's image per the policy on asset protection. I do believe, as a district, we need to improve awareness and continue a dialogue on becoming more culturally competent as our demographics change and as we prepare students for citizenship in a local and global economy. Our best educators meet our students where they are, and this is often the best practice in moving forward. I believe we also have an opportunity through the Cultural Competency Steering Committee and through our high school and middle school administrators in particular to evaluate those policies within our educational system which might foster instructional bias by race, gender, or religion. And those might include hiring and staffing practices, student discipline practices, high-stakes standardized testing, graduation rates, enrollment in both, and trends in both advanced placement and special ed, participation levels in co-curricular and travel opportunities, just as examples. And I believe the board can request that our superintendent provide periodic updates on progress of this group, consistent with Dan's recommendation of a guiding committee. Our ENDS policy gives us many examples where we can and should be monitoring student progress toward cultural and academic competence appropriate to grade and developmental capacity. We have already, the board's already charged our board to provide us with, and thereby the community, with those metrics, and that is an ongoing monitoring process. So at the end of the day, from my perspective, I believe it will be our communities, our school communities' actions which best reflect the culture we believe we foster in South Burlington. And I believe the current Rebel nickname does stand in the way of accomplishing those ends, and more so has been and continue to be one of the many positive identifying aspects of our school community. And my opinion would be to preserve the name. So at this point, I don't know if the board's pleasure is to take action or if we want to agree by consensus that there be specific action that we direct the administration to take. I heard a couple ideas. One is specific to identifying more specifically the current definition of rebel. And then I also heard the notion of a guiding committee, and I proposed that the cultural competency steering committee, along with the high school and middle school administrator, although I should leave that up to David, but that the superintendent identify an appropriate steering committee to come up with specific tactics, both to the name and around supporting policy, and then provide periodic updates to the board.
Yeah, I guess I don't think we should delve deeply into telling the administration exactly what to do. That's getting too far into the means. I think we've laid out our concerns, what we want to see done, and it's up to the administration to figure out the best way to accomplish that. I would strongly urge that should include a steering committee or a working group of some sort to guide that effort. But precisely what is done. I mean, I have my own ideas of what should be done, but I really think it's more the administration in the first instance that should be determining those. I mean, I guess I'd ask David if I'm on track with that, or if he wants us to lay out specific recommendations.
And I think that what the board has provided in your narrative feedback provides me with some recommendations and ideas for next steps. What I would say to you is it would be short-sighted of me at this quick moment to tell you all of those things that I would likely do, and I would certainly want to work with my administrative team and central office folks. Again, I think important for you to know we do have a lot of things currently in play, as some of you have already mentioned, as Mr. Burke has already mentioned. This is ongoing work for us. This is, again, building and continuing that work. So I'd love to be able to come back to you, the board, and we can decide on when we would do that, but give you some direct information about what's going to be
And I would
done.
add to that, I think through the communication we've received from the community, we've received a lot of, I think, positive tactical ideas that should be considered through that process. So is it the board's consensus then that we direct administration to develop a plan to come back and present to the board with the intent that there be periodic updates as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, I would like to open up the floor for some comments from the public in terms of, we know that there were going to be people disappointed or otherwise with the board's decision, and we want to really have an opportunity to provide a floor for some feedback to the board at this point. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Excuse me. My name is Jim Buddy. I did share my thoughts with all of the board members and with David. I think it's fair to say that I'm disappointed. I regarded this as a teachable moment, and now I see it as a missed opportunity. To look at and to describe the history of how this name came about, and to say today it is nothing more than generic and benign and disconnected from its past, I think is a form of historical amnesia. Some of you have expressed ways to sort of disconnect and redefine the name and the moment, and I wish you well. The proud tradition of this community and this school is not vested in its nickname. It's vested in its accomplishments and the character of its students, it's the parents and the community at large. To have a name that offends anyone in our community should be an offense to everybody in the community. So I really am disappointed in this. I wish you well as you look to the future. Chuck Bolton, a member of this community, wrote a letter to the other paper. I think it was shared with all of you. I think he expressed more strongly than I, and more personally than I, the power of what a name can do to an individual, to anyone who finds it offensive. So I personally have to express my disappointment. I hope that the process that you engage will be successful. I wonder how you can engage a process to deal with an issue like this and think that that alone is going to bring about the outcome that you desire. I think when there is offense taken by an individual, when a name is offensive, you cannot sanitize it. If it offends one or several, you cannot sanitize it. We talk about the Civil War. That is the background of where this name came from. I come from a family, there are 5 Civil War veterans, all from Vermont. One died in the Battle of Fredericksburg. Another was a prisoner of war at the infamous prisoner of war camp in Georgia. I visited that prisoner of war camp. Now, I'm not trying to stand here and say that we should recall and remember all Civil War veterans, but we should remember the sacrifice for which they fought to preserve the Union against the rebels. So I wish this community well. I wish the students to be successful, to all of you. I cannot express my disappointment any more strongly. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
Yeah, I wrote this down while I was actually listening to all your listening to all your comments. And I'll try to read it the best I can. A very disappointing night. Some very well thought out comments and reasoning for the decision to keep the Rebels name. But in the end, the school board took the easy way out. The committees and efforts that you propose will take time, be time consuming, and they will be expensive. But in the end, will not change what people inside and outside South Burlington think when they see and hear the name Rebels. Like Jim Lee says, the name is still the Rebels. You can't sanitize or change that name unless you spell it backwards. And you not knew that. So I'm very disappointed, and I'm sure this will be coming back to you now more and more, so it can be more time consuming now that you have taken this decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mary Brown Guillory, and my family and I moved here in the early 90s to this area. And when we were looking to buy a home, we had the opportunity to visit your school. And during that time, our child, Dion, was in track and field. And she actually won the state championship trophy for shot put right here on this field. What we were greeted with was your mascot and the sounds of Dixie playing. And after that track meet, we had to be escorted from the track to our car because it was unsafe. And we chose, one, not to build in South Burlington or to buy in South Burlington because of the impact that your school had on our family. I'm from Louisiana, and I called home to tell my family what we experienced here. So I'm gonna read this now. That was me as a parent. Another thing is, it was 20 years ago that the school board was sitting around the table. That's 161,000 hours that have passed since then and now. 20 years ago, and we are still here talking about that, excuse me, damn name. And it's I want to say shame on every one of you for thinking that a tree is not a tree. A house is not a house. We know what rebel is. Go Google it. I know what music I heard playing on that field. I know what Confederate flags we saw flying. So if you need something to be real and you want to revamp a name, let's go back to what the history was, because every one of us is a part of our history. So don't fool yourselves when you think you're brushing it under the rug. Just as 161,000 hours ago, the school board was going to just remove the mascot and brush it under the rug. Shame on every one of you for not building a more inclusive community and taking your white privilege, and I'm going to call it just what it is. It's white privilege, that you get to redefine what a name means to so many that it's hurt. How could you have that audacity to say? And as far as that training, you need to go back, because nothing you've said tonight has been inclusive. It's been a little bit of naivety or ignorance, or you're hoping that the community is ignorant. But you should be shameful. I hope you don't sleep tonight, because what legacy you're leaving for the children, for the future, is to deal with this name again. So I guess we have to come back in 161 more thousand hours and come back and talk about this name again. Shame on you. So I'll say that. My name is Mary Brown Guillory. I am representing the Champlain area NAACP. We are here to voice our concerns with the mascot name for the South Burlington High School and why it is offensive to so many people of color in this community. To be honest, the name Rebel will always be associated with racist policies and the Confederacy. To be honest, it will always be associated right here at South Burlington High School with what it did and meant to so many people. If you could have only heard the cheers that your cheerleaders used to say, you would be shameful. Everybody is saying it's not clear at this time what the intentions were when South Burlington High School adopted Rebels as a nickname after the school opened in '61. The moniker/icon should go because of what it represents now and what it will represent for the South Burlington School students and community in the future. The community is here to discuss the future of South Burlington High School and what they want for the legacy to be represented in years to come. Not looking at the past and saying, let's just change and tweak a few things, but what the future is. I implore the school board that your voice and your vote tonight is casting a vote for how this school and community will present itself in that future. To be honest, let us conjure up what we really visually see in our minds when we say the word rebel. The images represent an era when South Burlington High School had Confederate flags, decorated school buses, and a Captain Rebel mascot strolled on the field at the football games and the basketball games and the track meets. I remember, I attended those. Some of those games I remember how it made us feel. I remember my daughter grabbing my hand and saying, "Mommy, I don't feel safe, and even though you and Dad are with me, I still am scared." I remember the South Burlington police trying to get us to Dorset Street so that we could leave so that we didn't get hurt. 20 years ago, the South Burlington School District sat in this school to discuss this very issue. But we say they did not go far enough when officials announced a compromise decision to technically drop the Rebels as a mascot and move away from Confederate images, but to allow the moniker to persist as a nickname. How dare you want your kids to define that name and to carry it on so that it can live? It's nothing but hate. That's all it is. However, we are here lobbying for more inclusive decision to eliminate the name itself because of what it stands for and what it will represent in the future. It is at this time we are requesting that the South Burlington School Board, even though I know that's a farce, make a choice for the future and the future generations. Will South Burlington be known for using a racist connotation with negative images going through our community? Or will the school board and the citizens, and I think it's important that the citizens get involved, because evidently this school board will not do what's needed. Or will the South Burlington school citizens finally do the right thing to bring our communities to be more inclusive and respect the rights of others by making the right choice tonight? I implore you to remove the name Rebel and to begin a new era and a new direction for the South Burlington High School students and communities. I also implore any person that is supporting this school financially, any business, any nonprofit organization, we will be lobbying them to remove that support, because this cannot go on. This is an injustice, and you guys are hiding your heads in the sand, and you are not listening, and you are not listening. You're not looking forward to the future in trying to make a wrong right. You have the opportunity, but you have used ignorance and stupidity to ignore such a thing. God forgive you.
Other comments? Gentleman in the back?
Thank you. My name is David Gould, 52 years in South Burlington. First off, thank you for the personal view of the NAACP here in Vermont. I want to thank you for your decision to keep the Rebel name. When I think of a rebel right now, I close my eyes and I think of the rebels fighting over across the sea. I think of the rebels that fought in the Civil War. And I think of how we engage as a community to keep it separated, that we know that this name has stood for something that's not as fulfilling as we would like it to be, and the wrong that happened with the rebel name. But if we teach our kids that are right here, and the future generations, I mean, look at the engagement here. The future of our community will be stronger, that we know that it stood for something that was wrong, and we can make it a right. Are we brushing it under the carpet? Are we hiding our head in the sand? I grew up in the school district. My daughter's in the school district. I hold my head up high, and I have never met a rebel who puts their head in the sand. We stand up and we stand proud. We need to learn from this. We need to engage the community, and we need to build on it and build that proud tradition that we have on the front of the high school and move forward. And are we going to get in 20 years or 250,000 hours that we decide that the memorial up at Dorset Park doesn't stand for something any longer for people who gave their lives for our freedom and our democracy, that we need to remove it now? How far is this political correctness going to go? Like Bernie Sanders said, we've had enough of Hillary's emails. I think the community's had enough of the rebel name. Let's keep it and let's move forward and build a proud tradition here in South Burlington like we have since 1961. And I'd be more than happy to join that committee and be a parent advisor.
Yeah, thank you. Other comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I want to say that I'm embarrassed for South Burlington. I'm embarrassed for you five, Julie, Martin, Elizabeth, Dan, and Patrick. This is not merely a South Burlington issue, but it's also a national issue. And it's going to get a lot of coverage, and I think it's just an embarrassment. And I think that it's unfortunate that perhaps our most articulate person has to come from the NAACP to lay it out in front of you for you to understand. So now you can hear it from a white person that says political correctness is empathy that you don't want to deal with. That's what people call it. They say, oh, I'm sick of this political correctness. Well, we could dial it back a bit, couldn't we? There are plenty of slurs that we could use on white people if we choose to. So if political correctness hasn't gone far enough, then, well, I think it hasn't gone far enough. But it's not political correctness, it's empathy. And I'm very disappointed. And furthermore, I want to say that I don't think this issue is settled. I think it's just going to go on and on and on, because many people have learned about it and talked about it in the past couple of months. It's not settled. It stays here.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, sir, in the back.
Thanks. I wanted to mention that I don't think it's, the important part of this is what the name originally meant 100 years ago, or the Google definition that comes up. I believe the important part is what we choose to embrace. And I would just like to say that I do think we have embraced the positive aspects of the word's definition, and different words mean different things to different people. And there is no inherent definition or meaning in a word. It's what we make of it. It's something that's artificial, not natural existing. There's no correct answer. It's a process that's built over time and experience. And over time, it becomes part of our culture, and it just builds until it's a meaning that we think of every day. So I don't think we are trying to bury anything. I think we are trying to make the best out of a word that has a huge part of our culture, and especially the culture in South Burlington High School. I mean, I graduated from South Burlington High School, and I didn't really even think about this as a political issue until it got brought up just before I graduated. I looked at blue and gray every day in the gymnasium. I didn't even think Civil War. It was just so natural, built in. And I don't think that the intention is to offend anyone or to promote racism. I think it's just I think the newer generation just views it as something we grew up with. We see it every day, and we often don't think twice about it. But the intention is not for the sake of racism.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, why don't we take a minute and we're going to move on with our agenda. We're going to continue with our agenda now.
So I want to let the board know,
if you have a conversation and you want to continue in the hall, we're going to keep our agenda going. Appreciate some attention here. Thanks.
so city-school collaboration, as I've indicated to the board before, Pat Nowak, Kevin Dorn, myself, and Elizabeth meet on a regular basis. We have our currently tentative date set up for October 28th and November 11th. As you can imagine, we have a fair amount of things that we're going to be working on and discussing. Certainly, continuation of our work in master planning and visioning, legislative activities and upcoming initiatives are also something that's on our plate as well. So again, just to continues, I think obviously if there's feedback, want to make sure we're talking about certain things, this is a perfect time of letting us know what those are as we move through. It would be great.
We're going to cover master planning. All right, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
So again, and again, I thank Dan actually for just saying, hey David, where are we at with that solar project? But again, it has been on our radar. It's been slowed down. And so I've given you just a brief little update, but the city's been working on this for 6 to 9 months now, and on a contract that then went out and was not able to be moved forward. So they're currently looking at alternatives, and as I've indicated here, Atlas Power America is part of a new group that's working with the city to do that. Again, I think important for you to know is that, now with perhaps different terms, we're going to have to be watchful of what those terms are and what types of agreements we get into, and I'll be ensuring you that we get that information as we move forward. But again, just a quick update, our initial path has slowed down and changed a bit.
Do you know what was unreasonable about the terms?
I think it was a lot on the funding side, from what I understand from the city, that just things didn't come through the same way. There was agreements that just they couldn't do. So
Did we budget anything for energy savings based on that project delivery?
We did not. I mean, we've been pretty consistent on our budgeting around our efficiency projects, and we didn't make any significant adjustments to that with this going forward, so.
But just, I guess, one last point on that. As I recall, the projected savings that we might have received from this is something like $500,000. I don't remember if that was annual or if that was like over life. Was that over life?
Oh, that was definitely over life. That's probably
Yeah,
combined
of
with,
course.
combined with the city. Because it would have been about $15,000 to the district, depending on the price of alternative electric methods, so.
15,000 total? I thought it was
No, per year.
per year. Okay, so yeah, so 500,000 was over essentially the life.
Yeah.
of the- Okay.
But that would have been a substantial part of our power bill.
It would have been, I'm going to do the math real quick, 8%.
8%.
Yes, yes.
I guess the only reason I bring that up is, I mean, should we encourage the city that we're very interested in this happening, because it's a decent savings for the district as well.
We'll add that to the October 28th agenda. then.
Okay.
Again, I certainly indicated, we've continued to indicate that we're interested. Again, part of this was kind of, the period that's lapsed between, so we remain interested, and as long as, again, the agreements, commitments, locations, things of that nature are fairly consistent from the previous, so. The other thing I want to let you know is a budget schedule, and I've attached both, and again, I thank John and his staff for helping out with this. Both ours is, again, this is a draft budget schedule for you, and also the city's is attached, and things such as the steering committee meeting on January 20th are those that we share. Again, I think this will also be part of our conversation, Elizabeth, with the city. This is in part play why we have it here before you tonight, is make sure we're having these conversations earlier. As John says, last time, I think we were closer to the beginning of December when we did this, but we also had some distractions that were occurring prior to that. So anyway, I don't know if people have any questions about the budget schedule.
Not terribly significant things, but there have been some chafing between the consultants at the city and some of the ones at the school district. Are we at a point with these city collaboration things that make that a non-issue?
I guess we would need to know, I mean, I have to recall that some of the
Well, there were
the
things in
items.
the past that had to do with the sharing of mechanics.
Oh, yes,
and
right.
Garages and who paid for what kind of services.
I haven't heard of any of those.
No, again, I think.
All quiet is all quiet.
Yeah, but it's certainly, it's always good to look at that. I think also from the budgetary perspective of opportunities is, we've asked the questions in the past too around some of the shared services. And we've done it more of a, this is what we have and this is
I know
what you
there's quite a
have.
big effort put in a year or two ago.
A little bit longer.
I think it's been pretty quiet since then.
The only issue, it's not a issue of not cooperation, but our tennis courts are owned by the city. They're Parks and Rec owned the tennis courts around our property, and they're in need of maintenance before it was really planned. So, but we're working with the city on that. That's a new thing that you might want to know.
Do we have a citizens budget group?
We don't have it yet established. Again, John had it last year. In the prior year, we didn't have as much going on, but we didn't use them as much in the years prior to that. So the plan is yes. And, it's again all part of our schedule and getting those things in. So our hope is we'll be able to do that. So, thanks for that feedback. Also, the business manager hiring process, I've outlined that a little bit. Again, prior to this, I had indicated that John hadn't really had the opportunity to tell everybody, so it was less public. It's now more public, and we've outlined some things here for you around some of the ways in which we're going to advertise and cry, but advertise and cry. But and be sad. But I think we've outlined a fairly decent process. Currently working with Karen Dancher, Director of HR, to come up with, outline committee, and talked a little bit with the administrators about this around, hiring committee, how we're going to go about doing that. I will be soliciting an individual from the board to be on that committee, as well as some city representation on the committee for John's replacement. So we're really lucky that we have early notice. Again, part of John's communication and mine as well, and yours as well, starting tomorrow, can be about letting people know that we do have an opening, and we're a really good place. We're a really good place to work. And John's been really, out there kind of letting people know in a respectful way, but also letting people know that we're a good organization. So anyway, that's a little update. I don't know if you have any questions for me on that.
You want to reconsider?
We're trying.
Yeah, keep at it.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 9, master plan and vision update.
So I don't have a lot to update you on. I did want to just share with you one piece of additional information around the master planning process. And part of this is highlighting the Cropper report, and I'm going to be really brief on this, but this is a map that Cropper did actually, that didn't get out and posted in the book. And I will turn it on the screen actually, just so people can see it. Probably hard. Maybe you can just reduce it a little bit, Stuart. Sure. But I think, a lot of the conversation, this map represents currently in 14-15 where our children were located in the city. What you have in the Cropper report was it by school. So you had just the Central School, just the Chamberlain School, just the Orchard School. This pulls them all together. And I think it's really, for me, that's perfect. I think for me it's important, particularly in what I've recommended to you, the board, around a consolidated, was to look at also through the conversation, through the task force work, through the city plan development future. When you look at kind of the, where the current students are coming from, with the recognition that currently, again, what the city has available, and again, I say what they have available is really in this area, right? Actually, I gotta be careful here. But it's in this area, which is currently the Oak Creek Village property. Again, there's other properties that probably could also fit. But when I look at that, particularly in these areas that are acquiring additional building opportunities, for me, when I start to do some of that, it begins to point to a new city or a new center for, looking at and justifying a single school located in this particular area. I also think currently the corridors for traffic to and from Burlington, which impede us and challenge us from time to time, and travel on Shelburne Road, on Williston Road, where our schools are located near the airport, with again high volume traffic that are happening at times when we're moving children as well, also plays into this kind of visual that I'm wanting to just let you know. So again, I add this as another piece of just information. Last week or last board meeting, I talked about the looking at the total cost by school and looking at the spending limitations that are being imposed on us by the city or the state under Act 46. So again, this is another piece of information that I wanted to provide you. And again, Cropper, this was one that you haven't seen, nobody has seen. I will post this one up also on the, on the website. Again, this is currently, just remember, 14-15's children highlighted areas. It doesn't populate all the other future students that would come into play. So anyway, I don't know if you have any questions on, or thoughts or observations.
Is there any overlay that would show where new construction is planned?
I can work to do that. Again, part of what I'm wanting to provide is this some visual information along with the,
It's not your board.
the data that then supports that work. So I can work to get that and highlight it. I don't know exactly through the GIS mapping process how accurate I can be, but I think we can do it. If that would be something that you would like.
David, just so I understand this map, you have the different color-coded, those are the districts as we currently define them geographically?
That's correct.
And so whenever we see two different colors in the same district, we've got children that are going to school outside
That's correct.
the nominal district that they're assigned to?
That's correct.
Is that a choice scenario, or is there a different reason in different cases?
Well, there are, in most cases, we have students that are within our Chamberlain that are attending our Rick Marcotte School. But there's also been movement over time that has, that has changed that a little bit too.
But, and that, was that all due to AYP, or are there other?
Most of what you see that are outside district placement are related to choice, which was part of the AYP under No Child Left Behind. Highest percentage, absolutely. So again, it's an interesting thing when populated all together. There's probably other questions. And you can remember, back in 1998 was when these borders were drawn. Some of you were around or in the area, and you know that that's not, that was a difficult process, I think, for the community, as you had to, draw those lines and move, children who are currently maybe attending, or older children attending a school, but now the newers will be going to the other. Or in some cases, grandfathering those options, which also complicated the balancing. So anyway, I thought it was a piece of interest, and also giving you some opportunity. I've heard one around looking at highlighting where some of the newer development is.
Yeah, one of the things that comes to mind for me as we look at information like this is I do think additional information is going to be forthcoming that will start to inform the board's recommendation to the community. And I'm thinking about how to make this accessible in a kind of easy to find way, because I think there's so much information out there right now that isn't really summarized in any way. So I'm wondering if we can anticipate maybe coming up with, on the district website, almost a site that contains folders or something. I mean, I don't want to jump to a solution, but something that's organized in a way that if a community member wanted to go to the website and find information like this, that you wouldn't have to dig through volumes of data to find what you were looking for. I mean, it's going to take a little forethought, I think, but as I think about, I know information the board is requesting to inform any recommendations. I imagine that having that accessible on the website in a organized manner would be helpful to the community.
Currently what we have now, and again, sometimes things you may say, well, this one should be up above this one, on our district. We currently have master planning and visioning, and we share. Again, it's important to me that I'm sharing information that you also want to make sure is available. And we've done the various presentations and some of the feedback. Certainly these things can get posted up. Other correspondence that goes out can be posted up as well. It may be easier as that volume gets larger. I think that's to your point, whether it's just a folder that they can click on and then it opens up and gives them all the subtitles kind of thing.
Some kind of category.
Again, I'm a little bit out of my technological
We've done
comfort,
that
but-
before, where, I don't know, it was some issue, I don't know if it was the labor dispute or the negotiations, one of those
We did a left bar, I think, and the left part of our website allows for that, and I think we, again, off of our main page underneath the main headings, I think is what you want, some higher visibility.
Well,
and not tuck off
I
the
guess
corner.
all I'm thinking of is, rather than organize this after the fact when the volume of information
Mhm.
might be kind
Put
of
some thought
onerous,
ahead, yeah.
maybe think about that up front, so that
Mhm.
we're populating a table of contents of some sort before it becomes a little bit less accessible.
Mhm. I can I can look into that and find out what we can do.
Is there more on master plan review?
No, I think the only other thing is that, kind of a schedule moving forward. I mean, I think it would be good in the same context of what you're talking about. We have community members who, I think are watching and listening, which is great, but would like to know perhaps those that are attending city meetings and school meetings or listening and what is the timeline? Where are we at with the timeline? And some of them probably are aware of what the city has referred to their TIF deadlines and things of that nature. So I just think at some point, maybe, and again, probably right back to what you're talking about, is kind of a populating, schedule a little bit of what we can collectively come up with. I don't think we're there yet, but I think it's important for the community to know that we're doing our very best to try to move through and provide you, the board, some additional information, particularly on the funding side of the option or options that would most be appropriate for this district to do in the future. So,
yeah, I think it's probably important to reinforce each time we have this discussion that the board is working toward completing its own due diligence in a couple areas. One is really the impact of reconfiguring any schools on preserving and improving learning opportunities for students, and secondarily the financial impact of 2 or 3 scenarios, including a status quo baseline, such that we can solicit additional community feedback. So I think we should take every opportunity to make sure we reinforce that that's where we're going with due diligence, and that no decision has been made to sell or recommend the sale or swap of any school property. Do we want to talk about a little bit about a legal opinion?
I think it's
One comment, just a quick comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, go ahead.
So Tim Barrett, Royal Drive. I'd like to volunteer if the district needs any, person to work with them between planning and zoning to document any current construction going on for housing units, any future approved construction, and any other planned unit developments that are in the pipeline and not yet approved, but have some sort of a unit count that might happen in the next 2 to 3 to 4 years. If you already have a connection, great. If you need somebody...
No, that's great. I don't, Tim. I think,
okay.
Part of what I think is highlighting is behind us, and that we could do some updating based on...
Please feel free to contact me. I'll help you out.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
I do have another question.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Is this done already, or is it definitely moving forward with consolidating the schools?
No, that was the point of the comment I just made, which is the school board is completing its due diligence on the couple of items I've talked about in order to bring some options to the community to get feedback on.
Okay, are we going to have an opportunity to do any feedback tonight?
We can talk about that after. I don't think we're done discussing the topic, but I'll
Okay,
open it up for some comments at the end of our discussion. Thanks.
So I do think, one of the questions that's come up is around the legal, if in fact the board, at the end of its, due diligence phase makes a decision that this is the best way to go and whatever that option might be. There's been some question around how that would have to happen. Are the voters involved? Could there be a petition? I think there's been a fair amount of conversations that have emerged as a result, and we do have we've sought legal counsel in this regard, and essentially I think the short of it is that we can. It has to go to the electorate, and we're happy about that, but we did seek out legal counsel in that regard and have been waiting on that.
Yeah, I think that the board has been operating under the assumption that any sale or swap of property would go to the voters. So we did seek out through David a legal opinion on that. And Martin, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you said you worked for free.
Right, well, it's pretty easy. Any disposition of the property has to go before the voters of school property. It may not be the same rules for city property, but we're bound by that. It nails it down for me, because I think, from my understanding, the board has always operated, like you say, under the assumption we were going to go to the voters anyway. Now it is, even if we didn't want to, we have to. So that's my legal opinion.
I'll pay you what that one's worth.
You get what you pay for.
But I hope that does clarify. The board was in receipt of a couple of emails kind of asking clarification on that question. So we're preparing just a quick communication that if we do get some questions from the community that would validate, and I am taking by virtue of legal counsel that it is the board's consensus that any recommendation on the disposition of any school property would go to the voters with a vote.
That was my big legal word, disposition. That was.
You saw that, I picked that up. That advice was worth it. Anything else, David, or any of the board members on master planning or visioning?
I guess one thing I want to just raise is that the Planning Commission, from what I understand, just yesterday received the draft for the comprehensive plan of the component dealing with education. I believe they have a meeting next Tuesday that I'm planning on attending. But I believe that is available on the Planning Commission website.
Not yet. I was at that meeting last night.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's great.
No, they did say, because that was the one part that wasn't included in the document, that it had been handed to staff yesterday. They were supposed to stay up late and read it last night and then get it on the website this morning. As of right before the meeting, it wasn't done. Everybody's sort of been checking for it. But the idea is for the community to be able to review that, and then they're continuing that portion of the public hearing till next Tuesday, and that will be sort of the last chance for public to make comments before the final draft is put together.
So I guess I'd ask David if you could get that version from them and distribute it to us. And if everybody can get to David their comments and input, then I can work with David to present our viewpoint. The document's not short, but I think the section is going to be relatively short.
I think what they're proposing, they've changed the scope of what they've been proposing a little bit, whether that's what you want to stay with or suggest to them that they include. They've kind of taken some different paths.
So are they going to publish some kind of document that shows what the changes to the original are?
It's a little bit unclear. I haven't seen it yet. I know that there's staff, they've been working on it, and they're working to get it to me. So again, a couple of the Planning Commission folks are actually individuals that were on the Master Planning and Visioning, Art Plugo and Duncan McDonald. And so they have appropriately, under the direction of some of the city folks, reached out to us most recently. Actually, a little bit of an ask, like, how you doing with that? And I think some of that was from Martin too. So we're going to get it soon. I'll make sure that you have it. They've taken a shot at filling that information in. I don't know how thorough, nor do I know what interplay it maybe has or doesn't have with the rest of the document.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, a bigger area of concern or question around, how does the whole document flow, particularly to the issues that we're talking about here around master planning and visioning, connected to zoning, connected to our properties that we have, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, but we also have to make sure that we don't see any glaring inconsistency with what the board thinks the schools are going to. I don't know that there is. I'm just saying we just need to double check that.
Do we anticipate needing any outside expertise in that short window of when it's published and when the last feedback session is? Having not seen it, I don't know.
I skimmed through what was there before, and I don't think it's something that needs, it was relatively innocuous, so I don't think so.
So again, that meeting is Tuesday at
7 o'clock.
7. Okay. At City Hall, isn't it?
Yeah.
Any other comments on master planning and visioning from the board? All right, I'll open it up for a few minutes from the public if there are comments.
So, Tim Barrett again, I just want to ask this one question. Would we even be talking about this subject at all if it weren't for the fact the developer had made an offer for the central school property? Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I have an opinion, and I probably have the most tenure on the board, so we would be, it probably wouldn't, honestly would not be at the pace that we're talking about it now, but we were due for an update to the strategic plan anyway, and we've been monitoring legislative activity vis-a-vis the school district consolidation, so it was causing the board to really look at intra-district consolidation opportunities as well. So I think the short answer is yes, and it probably would be, proceeding at a slightly different pace. I have gone on record before that I actually feel the original Saxon Partners proposal helped accelerate a conversation that might have been difficult to get some traction with, because there are so many other priorities to talk about. So I actually think that's helped accelerate a conversation that ultimately we hope benefits the community. But again, short answer, yes, probably would have moved at a slower pace. Yes.
My name is Carol Hepper, and I've been in communications now as a psychotherapist. And I just wanted to express my concern about consolidating the schools to a larger community school. With my work with at-risk youth, I have found that young people don't do as well in larger venues, and they do better in smaller venues where they can have closer contact to teachers and smaller classes. Most of the young people I work with expressed fears in the hallways during breaks, and these are the young people who struggled, for sure. But I see it in other young people who manage to do well, that a smaller venue seems to be more conducive to mental and emotional health. And so I have a deep concern over this change in the community.
First of all, thank you. The board is in receipt of your very thoughtful communication, so thank you for forwarding that. We appreciate that. And I don't think there's any intent to modify class size for the consolidation. I can't speak for the board, but I know one of your concerns was specific to class sizes.
And just the scope of the space that somebody, a young person, would have to make their way through during the course of their day. They find many students find it overwhelming.
I appreciate those comments. Yes.
Bridget Burkhart, I just had a question about what is the plan in response to the city's request for feedback from the board about the Oak Creek property? Is there a plan? Has there been a decision made about what to say to the city, or what is the plan from the interaction with the city regarding that property and perhaps holding it if it may be a site of the school? What is the thought process?
Do you want to speak to it?
Sure. I think, as you know, I think as Elizabeth alluded to, some timeline disparity currently is in play between the city and the school board. I think Elizabeth appropriately articulated to Mr. Barrett around, as a result of the Saxon partner, kind of fast-track some things for the board, but nonetheless, I think we would have been talking about this particular topic. I think at the present time, the property that you're talking about, or the city is, we have to hopefully be in agreement that we're on two different timelines. And the city, we hope, is going to understand that. I suppose if they don't, then they'll need to do their due diligence around what they need to do, as the board will. Again, I have confidence in the board that they're going to make a logical, smart decision for the children of this community, and we hope that it's a collaborative effort. And certainly everything at this point, we have a great relationship with the city, so we don't want to paint that picture, but we're also understanding that they have some timelines as well. So we're going to work hard. I'm going to work hard to provide the board with information, along with my staff, to help them, get to a place where they can make a decision. So Oak Creek Village, we hope maybe remains, but that's not in our corner.
Yes.
Hi, Chris Osto, I live on Brewer Parkway. I came with a couple concerns. One, you guys have addressed one of them, or two of them really. Just talking to people in the community, there's been, I think, a lot of angst or concern over a perceived lack of transparency. So I think putting something up in a centralized site where we can all have access to it will go a long way to help that, because I know it, some's on the school board site, some's on the city right now, so it's just kind of hard to find things. And the other point was around the public vote, right? I think there was an article in the Burlington Free Press last week that set off some alarm bells for people, and I exchanged a couple emails with Martin around that, and it sounds like there is some misquoting going on there, but gave the perception that a vote might not be required, so I think the opinion of the board that a vote would be required to do anything like that would be, is reassuring. And then my third point would just be, we've talked a little bit about timelines. Are you guys comfortable with knowing what we know now, that the timeline we're operating on is enough time to do all the due diligence we need to do to get to a point where we're ready to make a decision, or do we just feel like we have enough time, or are we being rushed to get to an end point quicker than we want to?
I mean, what David suggested is we have to come up with our timeline and our due diligence, so we really owe both the community and the city what our timeline is, and that's our plan right now, is to work with David to develop that and communicate it. I guess I can speak on behalf of the board. The quality of the decision isn't going to be dictated by the amount of time it takes.
In other words, we'll take the time necessary to make the quality decision.
Yes, that. What he said.
Thank you.
Yes.
Steve Wislowski, Copplestone Circle. Has there been a side-by-side comparison of what the police, fire, and ambulance response times might be to a central location as opposed to the three schools currently?
In other words, to the response time currently to our schools?
Well, or what it would be in a consolidated location.
Yeah, no, we haven't done that. Again, we certainly have response times to the location area where they are now. But as far as a study, we haven't done that. Again, that's part of, I would say, the due diligence around safety and security that couples also building and safety security and all of those things as well. So that would be in that.
Just looking like Heinsberg Road or Dorset Street, it's Gregory Drive or across the street here.
We do have some challenges now, as you know, if you travel Shelburne Road at certain times or Williston Road at certain times. We have many challenges right now, not necessarily emergency vehicles, but just general traffic and getting boys and girls to and from locations are challenges currently, but point well taken. Yeah. Thanks.
Any other comments before we move on?
I just want to urge the school board to please fulfill your complete due diligence, and I want you to ignore all pressure from the city, because the city, I just want to say, the city, I don't think, the city has a vested interest, a severe vested interest in what happens to City Center. The school board probably didn't really have a vested interest in what happens to City Center unless something were to change. And I don't want the city to dictate to the school board and the district what should happen. I think the school board, if you have a vision for the future that takes into account the long-term capital costs, the long-term FTE costs for all the teachers, and all the other pieces of information that might point towards some change in the district, then you need to assemble that completely and present it to the public in an open forum, in a transparent way, and then, and only then, if you get the feedback that there should be a vote for it, should you go forward with a vote. I don't even think you should go forward with a vote unless you have the feedback from the community that this, in fact, is a common sense thing for you to do that's good for the city and good for the children and good for the taxpayers. If you can't assemble that common sense, conclusion, it's not worth moving forward at all. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, we will move on. Our next agenda item is on policy development, proficiency-based graduation requirements. And we have this warrant for action.
Yes, you do. So Stuart, on the markups, did we add the mark, I mean, there was a few
There was one markup between the first and the second reading, which was to go to awards as the word for diplomas. And so I believe in the copy you have, it's no longer shown as a markup because it was a change in the second reading. And so the rest of the policy as read the other two times.
And that was the only change where we talked about the
That is correct.
award.
So, since it's a very important policy, can you give the listening audience just a brief rundown before we just vote on this? Rather than, because I know we've dealt with it, but just to make sure the community understands what we're doing.
Yep. And it's great that we have also Patrick in the audience as well, but I would ask maybe Stuart just to give a little overview. Again, we have some folks behind you that
Sure.
I think would appreciate a little background on the graduation policy change.
Sure. Just to be clear, not last April, the April before, the educational quality standards were passed by the state of Vermont and the State Board of Education. And those, one of the requirements of that is that all students by the year 2020 will graduate based on proficiency, and calls for all districts to pass graduation policies about what proficiency looks like in their district. That is a district responsibility. The State Agency of Education put on model proficiencies in all subject areas that people could either accept whole as a whole and put that forward as their policy, to modify, or to reject, because it is a local piece. We worked on modifying. There was work done all last year by the high school departments and the administration there to come up with our graduation proficiencies. And we wanted to move forward quickly so that in January, when students sign up for courses, because it is the coming freshman class that will graduate based on proficiency in 2020 instead of Carnegie units, that all parents, all students would know the game. We didn't want to have it be something that was unknown. So we've worked very hard. I think as a small editorial comment, I think again, our administration and teachers at the high school have probably worked on this, if not more so. I mean, people are calling us to find out how we did the work we did, because it's so well done and is becoming a model for other schools. So with that, we're at the third reading of the policy, and again, these are the proficiencies themselves. You will receive the links with indicators. Indicators are not policy, but the kinds of things that these proficiencies indicate. And we are now building the performance assessment system that will go so that we will know that students are proficient.
So another question though for this is, what is the plan as far as getting the word out to parents as far as what this change is going to entail? I know that just a few weeks ago I was at the open house here for my 8th grader, and a couple of the teachers alluded to this, and it was the first that many of the parents had heard about this, that their class is the first class that's going to be subject to the new policy. So what is the plan for allowing the public to understand this?
Yep, I'll let you do that.
So first step is adoption of the policy. So that's
soon.
Yeah, and what we're really focusing on that group of 8th graders, and when the rubber's really going to hit the road in terms of having them understand the path to graduation is when we start doing enrollment. And that's a process that we do with parents and students together, working with the middle school guidance department. And so one of the things that is important to keep in mind is that we're not going to be graduating students based on proficiencies, for 4 more years. So right now, in terms of our responsibility to the class, we have to we have like a duty to warn, like this is the path. These are the proficiencies. And in terms of communicating that with parents, it's really, I think, easy to talk about that in terms of this is a profile of a graduate. So when you look at the proficiencies, these are the things that your students will know and be able to do, before they leave our system. And we're going to certify that by way of this performance assessment system that we're in the middle of building. So to that, and I've said this to this board before, but I need to say it again, and I think I need to make sure that parents understand it. Our kids, for the most part, are going to continue to access our graduation requirements through courses that we offer at the high school and assessments that happen therein. And that, especially in its first iteration. So I think that there's a lot of talk about how proficiency-based graduation requirements can kind of incent alternative routes to graduation, early graduation, long graduation, all that. And I think to some degree that's all accurate. However, I see that as kind of like version 2.0 of this graduation policy for the state. And so because we already have a fair amount of flexibility within the current graduation policy, we also have a fair amount of flexibility with South Burlington's current graduation policy. A very high percentage of our seniors have met graduation requirements, halfway through their senior year. They don't go running out the door like, woohoo, we're done. And a lot of times it's hard for us to remember that as adults because, when I got my master's, when I went to undergrad, I didn't take one credit beyond what I had to because, mostly because it would have cost me a lot of money. And so, but yet our students, we have 20 credits required for graduation. The average senior graduates with far more than 20 credits, far more. And so we expect that kind of experience, that the experience for the students is going to, for the most part, stay the same. Here's what's going to change, and I don't mind telling this to parents, but it really won't happen until after the students are sophomores because they won't be taking graduation level assessments until they're in their junior and senior year, which is pretty much aligned with what we do now. What you could do now, if you're really not a strong writer, you could kind of pick your way through our junior senior program in courses that are less writing intensive. And that might just, and on some respects you're kind of playing to your strengths, but on another respect, can we really say that you're college ready when it comes to writing or career ready when it comes to writing? So under this model, that's not going to be possible any longer. So, and then it's our job to make sure that, students who maybe aren't super excited about writing, that we create avenues for them to become proficient so that before they graduate, they've met that proficiency. And there's all sorts of other things that you'll hear about. There's other laws that need to change before the kind of flexibility that I think some like educational visionary types talk about. There's other laws that need to change before we're able to provide like just unbridled personalization. But this is a pretty major step in that direction. And just as one further side, the one thing that we're really lucky about is because we've had the big picture school happening within our school and that's been operating under a proficiency-based system since its inception, and all big picture schools are proficiency-based. We've really had this kind of lab within, and we've made mistakes there. We've done a lot of things right, and we've definitely learned, especially in terms of assessment, we've definitely learned about the verification of proficiency through having that program within our school. So we feel pretty lucky to have had that experience too. And in some respects, that kind of happened by accident because this wasn't really on the state's horizon 6 years ago when we started Big Picture. So but it certainly, in fact, I think on NPR they just talked about Big Picture today as a model of personalization through proficiency. Somebody told me that, I didn't listen to it, but I'll listen to it on the way home.
And so do the current 8th graders sign up for classes like January area?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the first time that parents will hear about it.
They will hear about it. I'm really trying to be cautious to not talk about it in a sense. I want to meet people where they are in terms of their understanding of what their students' high school experience is going to be like. So So I don't want to get too jargony when it comes to trying to explain how students are going to be verified as proficient. And the reality is they're going to take courses, those courses are going to have assessments within them, and students are going to need to show that they're proficient on those assessments. And that's not too different from what we do right now, although it's arguable about, you know, what's a D, you know.
What's proficient?
You know, I mean, there's so we're definitely tightening it up in terms of being able to explain what a D is, whereas right now it's kind of like, well, D is a credit, and so is an A+. And, you know, we understand there's a slight variation between the two, but going forward, we'll be able to say, you know, this is proficient, you know, so using, you know, scoring criteria, which is what we were working on this morning, and a performance assessment system, which is what we were working on this morning, that's locally developed, but draws from some of the work that this state and the national folks have put forth. So I think it's, along with the laptops, I think it is the single most exciting change in secondary education in my career, without a doubt. You know, and I think our students are going to be the true beneficiaries. And, you know, with a pretty experienced teaching faculty, but, you know, there's a lot of mid-career professionals on teaching faculty. A lot of people have described this type of assessment as, oh, this is pretty much when we're at our best. You know, this is when we're really hitting the target in terms of developing assessments that show what kids know. So it's just a matter of doing that more often, more intentionally. So.
And not to get, go ahead, Patrick, I'm sorry.
I have a kind of connected question. Do we have any external things that tell us what we think is proficiency is understood as being proficient by perhaps like a post-secondary institution? I mean, we know that there are, if I look at data across the state, there's a number of high school seniors across the state that take remedial classes in college because they really didn't get it in high school. Do we have any of that kind of feedback loops that tell us that our kids are graduating, but some of them are still struggling at the next step with something that they should have maybe got in high school?
Right now or going forward?
Yes.
Okay, so right now I am unsure if I can access data relative to the students who continue. I'd probably call VSAC actually. I used to get data about our continuers who went to the state colleges, CCV and UVM, but I don't get that like I used to anymore. They would give me all sorts of data about literally like grades in freshman English classes and all that, but we no longer get that. I don't know if like the clearinghouse gives us data about what courses students take when they enroll in post-secondary institutions. So, but going forward, our proficiencies and what it means to be proficient is aligned with the National College Readiness Standards. So, and that's what our assessment system is going to be aligned with. So, it's not data that I necessarily, at this time, I'm not positive that I could say like, oh, I can triangulate this, you know what I mean? I can say we've got local assessment, we've got external assessment, we've got multiple times. I mean, so there's still some imperfection within the assessment system. And I'm wary to attach stakes to external assessment on the students. I'm fine with attaching stakes to external assessments on the school and the programs, but to individual students, I think that gets pretty. You know, those are so-called high-stake tests. I mean, I think we got to be really careful with that.
So, out of curiosity, Patrick, why do you not get the data from CCV and UVM?
They just don't give it to us anymore. I think it was part of a program that probably the legislature was excited about, and I think it probably ran out of money. But there's certainly the will to provide that kind of data, and for us to be able to get that kind of data. And Stuart's got us involved with this national clearinghouse. That I think there's some hope there.
The piece is, though, you know, I mean, a lot of the EQS, a lot of the statistics around the Common Core, you know, come from the fact that a lot of students come to college and they're not prepared. From not just the state of Vermont, I mean, I don't have the South Burlington data on that, but the state of Vermont nationally, and so on, and don't stick and stay, or it takes them 6 or 7 years, you know, to get through college, you know, which, you know, nobody wants to pay tuition for. I could see Julie's face just, you know, fall with the thought that.
You get 4.
Yeah, 4 and you're done, right?
You get 4.
That being said, because I don't want to go, you know, too far afield, I mean, part of the whole process here is to have this policy passed so that we can really begin to move forward, you know, as Martin has said, so that we'll be able to say clearly, and like I said, a lot of work went in last year, and then it becomes the place where we really begin to work on the indicators, which are done at the high school, to work on them here at the middle school this year, to build the assessments at the high school, to start to build the assessments. And we have a 3-year plan, and in fact, it's part of the ends monitoring. I'll be talking about this, I think, 2 board meetings from now, how this all fits in to be able to really have a system that effectively and truly monitors our kids with the ends. So it's all part and parcel, and you know, I echo Patrick, because I really do think this is an exciting time in education, and really, you know, another place where South Burlington will take the lead.
Well, I move that we adopt the graduation policy.
Second.
I just want to add one comment. I still would have a strong desire that the district ends policy would precede the level of detail that's in the education quality standards, just in terms of what we've tried to accomplish within the district, but I have understood all the rationale for why that doesn't at this point in time. Any other comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to executive limitations policy monitoring, and action is warned on 2.2, treatment of staff.
So some changes were added to that, particularly the Sarah Denny report was added.
Thank you for that.
Incomplete, or incomplete form, not incomplete.
Looks pretty good. You didn't?
No, that was my issue too, I think.
Sorry. Really consolidation. I know.
Any questions or comments? Should we go through the detail policy? The detail policy 1, reasonable interpretation,
Yes.
adequate data,
Yes.
and in compliance.
Yep.
Yes.
Detail policy 2, reasonable interpretation,
Yes.
adequate data,
Yeah.
and in compliance.
Yep.
Yes.
Detail policy 3, reasonable interpretation,
Yes.
Yes.
adequate data,
Yes.
and in compliance.
Yes.
And detail policy 4,
Yes, yes, yes.
I've actually lost track here. Detail policy 4 is reasonable interpretation, adequate data, and in compliance. There's a modest change in detail policy 5 under evidence, so reasonable interpretation.
Yes.
Yes. With that change, adequate data
Yes.
and in compliance.
Yes.
And detail policy 6. There were several changes on evidence, but reasonable interpretation.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
With those changes, adequate data
Yes.
Yes,
and in compliance.
Yes.
So the overall policy, just with a quick read of 2.2, with respect to the treatment of paid and volunteer staff, the superintendent shall not cause or allow conditions that are untimely, unfair, undignified, disorganized, or vague. Reasonable interpretation,
Yes.
adequate data,
yes. Well, I'm not entirely sure about the interpretation, but I'm gonna let it slide this time. And it's just, it goes back to, let me just, a second. Well, I know so close, but it still doesn't make any statement about whether conditions were untimely, unfair, undignified, disorganized, or vague. it just looks to the enumerated
Everything
numbers.
prior.
You know, it just looks through 1 through 6.
So
It
the
doesn't-
problem is when you're saying that now, about you're saying that about the overall policy, I mean, what is David supposed to do with that? Because are we gonna, you want him to come back to us with a change on that?
I think just, you need to make a note to do this for the next time. This is the third time you've had it, but I think you need to, and this has been a consistent input that I've provided, that whenever the policy says further, without limiting the scope of the foregoing, and then in your interpretation, you're limiting the scope, you're limiting it from the scope of, you know,
To the foregoing.
Yeah, well, no, you're saying, well, I'm not gonna look at the foregoing, it's just the enumerated items, 1 through 6. But you do have to weigh in on, in this instance, whether, you know, untimely, unfair, I know that's a broad, you know, but I think you have to address those. And this is similar in a lot of the policies. And you are doing it in a number of the other policies, where you're looking at that first statement and you are interpreting that first statement as well. So, I mean, I would ask, I think I'm fine, you know, this time, but I would ask that the next time you look closely at what does that mean to you, as far as making sure there are not conditions that are untimely, unfair, undignified, disorganized, or vague. In fact, I thought at one point you in fact had dealt with that in this very policy, but I could be misremembering.
So with that feedback,
Yeah, I mean, I'm good. I can talk to Martin more. I mean, I understand, you know, contextually what he's saying. It's hard though, because part of the policy in which I'm being guided to is asking me to interpret and provide evidence all the way through. So then to come to the end and say, you know, be reflective, in my words, be reflective on anything else that might not be included that pertains to this, kind of then opens, you know, then opens it back up again. You know, so I'm confused on how best to do that. And you know, I'm happy to work with Martin a little bit more. Maybe we can come to some. It's not that I'm trying to be difficult.
No,
I just
it's not that.
either I'm not able to comprehend.
maybe there's some benchmarking for
Yeah.
districts that.
I have looked at some others, you know, and I think you are far more into the, you know, the depths and the evidence that I think is really right. But I'm happy to do it. I just don't want to quickly say I get it, because I don't quite get it, you know.
Well, and it could be as simple, I won't belabor this now, but it could be as simple as, in your interpretation, recognizing that you also have to look and see if there have been any conditions that are unfair, that are undignified, disorganized, vague, and you have to pass on whether you have recognized any, or have any of those been brought to your attention. Anything outside of what you've discussed here, has there been anything that's been undignified?
In addition
I
to
think
the
you would
way.
know these, they would have been reported to us somewhere along the way, I think they would. So, but
is it-
why don't you, I'm happy to
No, I'm
to work
coming
with
better.
you and
Okay.
the next time it's come through.
So
Yep.
in compliance with the overall policy? Yes. All right. So we'll move on to 2.4, financial condition and activities. You want to go through?
Again, you know, John, this is a huge portion of John's work. I've had a chance to look at it. Highlighted in yellow is kind of the updated, most current information. Happy to have John actually walk you through it, or whatever you would like to do.
Is this a, what reading is this?
This is the first.
So we don't have action on this one.
Well, no, we
Well,
can have
you
action.
You can.
But we could.
If there's not any problems.
Okay. So shall we go through the detail policies first? And if we can, I don't have a sheet on that one, David.
You got it.
The assessment sheet? Oh, well,
It's in your.
oh, I'm sorry, I got it right here.
Blue folder.
Yeah. I'm using my other ones. So on detail policy 1, expend more funds than have been received or budgeted in the fiscal year. The interpretation is reasonable.
Yeah.
There are some highlighted components of evidence. Are those adequate?
I think so, my article
Any questions on those? So those are adequate, and David is reporting compliance. Is the board in agreement?
Yes.
All right, detail policy 2 should not incur debt in an amount greater than can be repaid by certain otherwise unencumbered revenues within 90 days. The interpretation is reasonable.
I have a question on the interpretation that may just be me catching up here. So this, the way he phrases this, I interpret this to mean that borrowing is only undertaken with the authorization of the board. And in its simplest form, I thought I read that the policy was, he can do what he needs to do if he can resolve it within 90, if he can make us unencumbered within 90 days. It doesn't seem to prohibit him, it just prohibits him with a window greater than 90 days.
I think the law goes, I come up, but I think I think the law doesn't allow any borrowing at all in that one to the school board.
Yeah,
So
I would agree that his interpretation is probably right. Maybe the policy is worded in such a way that it might imply that he does have more authority than he does.
But in the policy, then I have laws that require me to be, to uphold, so then the interpretation pulls that in.
It's fine, because, so you're more constrained than our policy says.
So we have
by law.
policies and procedures, so there's laws, I have to then interpret it and provide.
It seems to me that the policy gives the administration the possibility of using funds that were allocated for another purpose to pay off something in anticipation of getting some money in at another time because of some cash flow situation, as long as it resolves within 90 days.
Right, if we have the money.
Doesn't necessarily mean debt, it may just be trying to manage cash flow.
Well, it says incur debt.
Yeah, so no, it's not just cash flow, it's debt.
And that was
I would have to agree with that.
That was my reading of it.
Yeah.
But I think if the law supersedes our policy, then the interpretation is still correct. Okay.
And
So, but maybe the policy.
well, and actually, if you read the precursor to it, it's the superintendent shall not incur debt. That you were reading that.
In an amount greater than can be repaid in 90 days.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, I
Shall
was
not.
thinking,
We
That
could
negative.
make a note of that at some point, and maybe modify that policy.
Just say
There's probably
shall not.
too many other things on the.
Well,
I
It's in the
agree that the
front.
policy.
I'm just saying if it confuses the reader on the back,
yeah,
shall not.
fair. Okay, so detail policy number 2, reasonable interpretation.
Yes.
Adequate data, there is a change under evidence or some further explanation.
Yes.
Adequate data, and David reports compliance, do we agree?
Yes.
All right, detail policy 3, shall not use any long-term reserves. Interpretation,
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
there's some changes on the evidence. Is that adequate data?
Yes.
An update.
That-
Number 3,
Yep.
the outstanding balance of $6,028 due on Munson Field was paid in full today.
Wow.
We'll report that next year, but I thought I'd throw it in that.
All right, and compliance?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, detail policy 4, shall not conduct interfund shifting in amounts greater than can be restored to a condition of discrete fund balances by certain otherwise unencumbered revenues within 30 days. I feel like I didn't even just speak English.
No,
You throw the word disposition in there, we're going to be in a good place.
Is the reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there are little changes on evidence, adequate data?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And David is reporting compliance. Do we agree?
Yes.
Yes. All right. All right, detailed policy 5, shall not fail to settle payroll and debts in a timely manner. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
There were some evidence added in data, adequate data.
Yes.
Yes. Mhm.
And David's reporting compliance. Do we agree?
Except for that $50, but we'll let that pass, right?
I have a comment on that.
Yes.
I was talking to an accountant I'm married to, and she said, you still use Pitney Bowes? And she goes, that's kind of passe, because a lot of people go directly to the post office, so we're gonna investigate that.
Oh, that's good.
Because we think the Pitney Bowes sat on our check for 2 weeks.
I don't really know what that is.
It's
What do they do?
It's a postage meter, a big machine, but it loads from the post office postage into this big machine. But now there's, we have the technology here, we could go to the post office and print labels and that kind of thing, so it's a lot more flexible. So, anyway, some positive change, maybe.
Thank that accountant.
Yeah.
All right, detail policy 6, shall not allow tax payments or other government-ordered payments or filings to be overdue or inaccurately filed.
Yes.
Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Can I ask a question? What does it mean to be substantially accurate?
All but the pennies or something, right?
Well, yes, I mean, if there's a dispute on something here that the state questions, and it's because we did something wrong, we report it. So, there might be a question of, we do a Medicaid report, it's on here, there's sometimes there's questions about what year the last deposit applied to, that kind of thing. And I wouldn't report that because it's something no funds are withheld, and it's just minor nuisance from our standpoint and not significant. But I think the main thing is, are we on top of, from my perspective, are we on top of the deadlines and we file things on time?
Correct. We're after proficiency, not perfection.
So, in compliance?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, detail policy 7, make a single unbudgeted purchase or commitment, or shall not make a single unbudgeted purchase or commitment of greater than $25,000 or the addition of a half an FTE teacher. Splitting orders to avoid this limit is not acceptable. Interpretation?
Yes.
Reasonable?
Yeah.
Adequate data?
Yes.
And in compliance as reported?
Yes.
Okay. Detail policy 8, the superintendent shall not spend surplus. Interpretation?
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
Yes.
And in compliance as reported?
Yes.
Detail policy 9, superintendent shall not fail to aggressively pursue receivables after a reasonable grace period.
Yes.
Reasonable interpretation?
Yep.
Adequate data? And in compliance?
Policy is a
Violation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we have to decide if it's a.
So we do have a pilot
acceptable.
violation as reported, so,
Compliance.
Go to the plan.
so not in compliance, and is the plan acceptable?
Yes.
All right, detail policy 10, shall not accept non-resident tuition students unless tuition is being paid by other Vermont school
Yeah.
districts or the state.
I actually do have a little thing with this. So I'm just wondering, I know we've talked about this before, but I'm just wondering if somewhere in here it needs to say that we have a maximum number of students we would accept. You know what I mean? Because it says we would accept anyone, but there's got to be some, like, physical limit to what we could accept, right?
I guess what would you be trying to accomplish with that?
Because we don't have it anywhere else, and we've talked about it before in terms of caps and stuff like that, and wouldn't it be best if we're gonna have it anywhere in policy?
Well, I guess my view is that happens anyway, because the board has to approve anybody coming here that is not going to be paid. And
Yeah.
and that what it would be doing would be, presumably it could be depriving, or binding a future board as far as the maximum number, but not necessarily. This is just for the superintendent. And even if we put a max in here, I don't think it's kind of surplus, because he's got to come, or she's got to come to us in the future for even one student. I don't know what I'm putting a max.
Yeah, I
just don't
kind of
know.
look at it and say the max could also change with internal enrollment too. And you technically only worry about the max if you have space or staffing constraints. And there is a separate override on half of an FTE.
Right, well, that's true.
I mean, unless we were setting like the superintendent can take up to 5 without coming to the board, I mean, that's,
Yeah, that's
I don't think we
different.
want to do that.
No, right,
But
okay.
since the superintendent will come to the board no matter what, even if it's just one, right?
Okay, yep, good.
So reasonable interpretation,
Yes.
adequate data,
Yes.
and in compliance.
Yes.
Is that one is in compliance, okay. So looking at the overall policy, 2.4, financial condition and activities. With respect to the actual ongoing financial condition and activities, the superintendent shall not cause or allow the development of financial jeopardy or material deviation of actual expenditures from board priorities established in the ends policies. Reasonable interpretation?
And I want to point out that this one is, you've done this, I mean, you have not, you've looked at that first paragraph, and you've interpreted that in your interpretation. And then you've given the evidence on not just the fact that we're in compliance with all but one, but we're in compliance with these other two. You know, there's evidence that we're in compliance with the bit about the ends and such. So, yeah, this is kind of along the lines of what is an example of what I was looking for.
So even more so than 2.2, David's interpretation is reasonable.
Well, I really read it. It's, I dissented kind of about the reasonableness of the last one, but it's not a slide, so I don't want to.
And data is adequate,
Yes.
but overall policy will not be in compliance, and compliance plan will be acceptable. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 12, board development.
This is in your packet as well.
So I have a quick question on the 5H, since we've been on. Should it, I know maybe this was answered last time when it was late at night when we took this up last. But did we, decide to take action, did you want to say decide whether to take action on items? Or did we decide that we didn't need the whether in there? Decide whether to take action on items that are beyond. I'm looking at Patrick because he came up with this. You see what I'm saying? I mean, it's,
You want 5?
at 5H. I think everything
So
else.
was this added at the last reading?
We changed,
We
yeah,
changed
yeah.
it.
Per Patrick's fine language, but I'm just trying to.
So this is in reference to the board has taken on the following non-governing outputs.
Right.
And among others, added deciding to take action on items that are beyond the authority of the superintendent.
Could the decision be to not take action?
Well, that's what I'm wondering if we need to.
Well, I mean,
It could be that we need the weather.
Well, that's, yeah.
weather certainly includes that explicitly.
Yeah, well,
I'm just wondering if taking action could be, well, we decided not to take action.
And I think that's the discussion we may have had 2 weeks ago, and I came around to saying, yeah, you don't need to have weather in there. Is that kind of where we are?
I
Okay,
think
that's
that's right.
cool. That's cool. Then I move to adopt this board job description.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Job description. All right, agenda item 13, setting the agenda for the November 4th meeting.
So this is a meeting that I'm not currently that 4th, you heard earlier that evening, and that I'm not at. So again, I think you could keep it on, and I would schedule accordingly to have folks, do the necessary presentation. Organizational structure, I probably would have Karen Dancher provide some overview, obviously based on our administrative feedback. One-on-one initiative, obviously Stuart would be able to provide. We have some of these others then that you've taken care of tonight under the monitoring reports. Board job description, so you probably can either keep it fairly, light and move up some things from future agenda items, or pull in some things that we've been working on.
Well, I think we do have to add master planning and visioning in here.
Are we going to be in a position to talk a little bit more about the timeframes and such on the master planning by then?
You may, I think we have a little bit more discussion to do on that from my perspective, but at some point we need to kind of give a draft schedule or a schedule. Perhaps we'll know a little bit more too. We can start working with the city.
Is that realistic to have that conversation when you're not here?
Well, I think you can have it. I mean, it's probably appropriate that you have the conversation. I mean, I can have a fair amount of information that provides my...
My hope would be we have something we receive from you that we're reacting to or discussing. Is that fair?
The other thing, and I certainly don't want to make your agendas any longer, I do still have the SBAC data and the science kneecap data that should be put in front of you in some way. I've sent that data to David.
He did send it to us.
I think we should add that because we're taking off treatment of staff, financial condition, and board job description. We just got all those out of the way.
And good sequencing.
Compensation and benefits is a very short monitoring report, so it might be nice to get some stuff.
David, according to the budget schedule, you need to add 2.5 planning and budgeting.
Sorry. Is that going to be ready?
Oh, on our, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, that changes
Just asking.
what I just said.
Hoping for a no there, Tom.
No. So we don't have that. So I think you can keep the administrative reports on. Maybe and I can work a little bit with Stuart. We kind of need to do a little bit of timing here on the numbers. Maybe we can get one of them in. One of the data sharing. Again, I think that kind of plays in because we're going to start ramping up with budget. And the budget development is going to be based on assessment. And we should be, given our MTSS work and all that, I think that would be important to fit if we can.
Right, and also because it's scheduled for the agenda after that, the November whatever meeting, to start to talk about the assessment plan for the end. So I think it leads into that conversation.
So if you can look at just the timing of it and if we can fit at least one of those in. All right, we'll move on to future agenda items. Everything have a date on here?
We don't have We All Belong on there for a date. We probably, I'll work, given some of the more recent activity, we'll get that put in there.
And I
That may be
think
something-
the We All Belong was a CEDO program, so I might refer to this as, I guess you can make that call, but I've been referring to it as cultural competency.
Yeah, one of the same. I think the naming of that work under our wellness position is probably in need for, some shaping and work, but Susie will be working with us on that. So we'll get a date on that from her. That will work into your schedule.
We were just looking at future agenda items. The first one, South Burlington Schools Foundation update, monitoring report 2.4. I realize what's reported 2.4 is just a minor part of that. I don't know if that's the reason it's on here or if it's a bigger issue.
I think it should be separate, actually.
Yeah,
I think we need a regular update on that without.
We need him to start collecting money for
I
the new
know.
school.
Well, we haven't really had a discussion separate to the foundation in a while, so.
No, probably do,
Yeah, so maybe separate to at least once. Anything else on future agenda items? So consider the minutes of the October 6th meeting. Any recommended changes or comments? Seeing none, those are approved. Any comments or question on AP orders 14A and 15? Okay, Seeing none, I will take a motion to adjourn and go into executive session to discuss labor negotiations with teachers and support staff on the grounds where premature general public knowledge was proven to the board of substantial disadvantage.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.